understand. Freedom has many difficulties, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in.
Welcome everybody to the Leo Zagami Show with Leo and Christy. Saturday, May 3rd of the year of the Lord 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an incredible week because, yes, we are here with the new book. Shiny cover this time for the last installment of my confession series. This book, guys, is the only book this year that is exposing the Jesuits, and actually is one of the few books, 3 in total, which I know exist, which expose the Jesuit order since the middle of the 80s, including Father Malachi Martin with his Jesuits, including also rulers of evil of, what was his name, Tuper Susi. And then we had in the year 2000, Eric John Phelps with Vatican Assassins. This is incredible. Nobody wants to talk about the Jesuits. Nobody wants to expose them, Christy.
Except for you.
Oh, well.
You expose them.
This is the last, though. The last confession, because the confession series is now perfect. 12 volumes to explain in depth what is really this whole fuss about the Illuminati, the real Illuminati, not the fictional ones, not the ones out of urban legend. So
I think most people are way too scared to expose what you exposed. So you don't do it because they're
know
afraid.
What that cost me. I had to flee Europe in 2019 because of my exposure work. So, and I always feel this work I'm doing is in some way also driven by God, and
it is driven by God, you silly.
Absolutely. But what happens is that I started this process many years ago. The confession series started to be published in Japan, out of all places. Which
great?
is actually a whole chapter here about the Jesuits in Japan. And then we went from Japan into Italy, where it became immediately a bestseller, just like in Japan. And then after many attempts, and a visit here to California in 2014, thanks also to the interest of Sean Stone, the son of Oliver Stone, and of course Brad Olsen with the CCCC Publishing. We managed to publish the trilogy and another couple of books, and then of course we started Cursum Perficio, and from there it was like an unfolding of circumstances that eventually, of course, as you know, led me to leave Italy. And I explain here what happened in 2016 when I reawakened the strict Templar observance to challenge the egregore of the Jesuits in their birthplace, where they were actually founded. So it is, I must say, interesting. Sorry, guys, I want to just take a better position here. I find it incredible that nobody has written about the Jesuits, but I understand, like I explained in the book, you know, they are the scientists of the church. They're in charge of the educational system. They are also the Vatican assassins, the intelligence operatives. So everybody is scared of them and also doesn't really know how to challenge intellectually these Jesuits. I mean, this was not an easy book to write, and Christy did, of course, the editing as usual, and that also was not an easy task.
I did it in, 4 days?
But we did everything in record time because we really felt God upon us, especially since I thought this book will at least reach the hands of the Pope and then maybe bring him to the afterlife. Instead, he died, and I was like, oh, well, at this point, we need to bring this book out immediately.
Everything changed after Easter.
and now with the upcoming Papal Conclave, you want to really understand what is going on? Volume 12 of my Confessions, History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and their Luciferian Court. I tell you guys, this book is already #1 in a series. I mean, I'm not making up this. I mean, we can go and check together on Amazon.com where this book is standing in the charts. And it's really, and I'm having a lot of great shows that are inviting me. So I think that in a week from now, when eventually the Pope is going to be elected, because I think in a week from now, we're going to have a new Pope by next Sunday, not this Sunday, the following Sunday. Well, you will see that everything I wrote coincides with the truth. There is 2 options for the Pope. Either is an African Pope, or either it's a Chinese Filipino Pope, Luis Antonio Tagle. And the incredible thing about this, before moving on, we have any sponsors today?
We only had Nagarizada today.
Guys, we need sponsors, and you are our sponsors, of course.
We have nobody that's sponsored for December, so here we are.
For December, we are in May.
I mean, for May, sorry.
Sorry. And what time zone are you?
Sorry, I mean May. Yeah,
okay.
We don't have anybody for May. So.
Yes, we don't have any sponsors. So remember this. I mean, I'm doing this show, of course, with your support. And if you purchase the book, I know that you are supporting us. But without a sponsor, if that doesn't happen, I will have to book myself elsewhere because I'm very much in demand as a Vaticanist. That's my specialty. And so we will have...
This audience is special because this is your audience.
Yes.
So, I mean...
That's true.
This is our audience because I've been here too.
Yes.
So, I mean, I hope that you guys will support us in our work because it really is great work and we are doing it for God. So,
absolutely.
But I have faith. Faith we shall go on.
yes, absolutely. So let me put here on the front of the screen the GoFundMe. There is also a Cash App handle you can find at leozagami.com together with my latest article. And it's actually my latest article I want to focus on because, guys, everybody is criticizing Trump for suddenly publishing this AI-generated image of him as Pope, thinking that this is just a superficial move from Trump who is joking around. Guys, that's not the case. This is something much more profound. Remember that in the last conclave, when they elected Bergoglio, the NSA was present there, and they were monitoring every single move of the cardinals. And Trump, who is not Pope Trump, of course, knows very well what's happening with this conclave. This conclave is rigged, like I explained in this book, by the late Pope Francis, but is also very much influenced by the Vatican-China deal. And the Vatican-China deal is no joke. So if they take control of the papacy, they have been pouring billions into the Vatican for a very long time. I have written several articles about it. So let's go immediately on my website, where you can also check out my latest article. Here we are. The real reason Trump shared an AI image of himself as Pope to challenge the upcoming conclave rigged by the Jesuits and the CCCP. So the Chinese Communist Party. So please, Christy, read this article. You have it clear? That's it? Is the image big enough for you?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Donald Trump posted an AI-generated image of himself dressed as the Pope on social media a week after he attended Pope Francis's funeral, sparking outrage among some Catholics who have not yet understood the gravity of what is happening in the upcoming conclave, which, as I explained in my latest book, Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 12, History, Secret Societies, and the Politics of the Jesuit New World Order and their Luciferian Court, has been completely rigged by the Jesuits. This time, the successor of Pope Francis was decided before the conclave in the Jesuit headquarters of Borgo Santo Spirito, where the politics of the Church of Rome have been increasingly determined since Vatican II. As I explained in my previous article, the Chinese Communist Party's push for Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle as first Asian Pope is increasing and gathering Jesuit support. Beijing is pushing for Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, which may change if they decide to usher in an African Pope. Africa has been crucial to China's foreign policy since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1947. China supported several African liberation movements during the Cold War and every year since 1951. The foreign minister of People's Republic of China visited an African country, which included establishing the International Department to manage relations with foreign communist parties. Early interactions, such as the 1955 Bandung Conference, aimed to gain recognition for the People's Republic of China and limit Soviet influence, especially in the Cold War era. The CPC's approach evolved, including material support, training programs.
The CPC means the Chinese People's, is basically the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Party is something that has always been involved with Africa. And that's why we see so much of this presence in this continent in the last few decades. It has increased, of course, as China became richer and richer. They have been able to also gather even more influence in this continent. And then we have a new level after the Cold War, because they are no longer in competition with another modality of communism like the Soviet Union. Now, China is the major communist country, while Russia, as you know, rejected communism and they went into a different direction. But they are both, of course, allied in what is the Sino-Russian world order. However, please continue. Now they have a new level, which includes material support, training programs.
And more recently, party-to-party exchanges focused on leadership and governance. China-Africa relations are the bedrock of China's foreign policy, so it will make sense if they eventually decide to support Cardinal Peter Turkson or another African rather than Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle.
Cardinal Peter Turkson is the one I've been pointing out also in Volume 7. He's a favorite of the World Economic Forum, but there's also other African cardinals which are, of course, possible papabili, as they are known, the candidates to the papacy. Nevertheless,
Giuliano Di Bernardo.
Who is somebody we know very well,
Yeah, I
through
met
also, and also Pier Giorgio Bassi, who is his vice. And that was one of the first people that Christy met when I brought her to Rome, because I was actually working on the promotion of Angel and Demons when you came to Rome. You remember? And
Yeah.
I just and that is the introduction of my book, where I explained in the introduction of this book how the Illuminati and the Freemasons acts like little children in front of the Black Pope, the Superior General of the Jesuits. So it's very important to start with the introduction and then go through each chapter, where you will learn a lot about the controllers of the control. I mean, the people who control, the puppeteers, have themselves controllers, and those controllers are the Jesuits. So please continue, Christy.
Giuliano Di Bernardo is a Jesuit fifth-class agent, currently Grand Master of the Italian Academy of the Illuminati, and he still hopes for the improbable election of his dear friend, the Vatican Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin.
This is something that I'm not just inventing out of thin air, guys. This is something that came out today on Il Fatto Quotidiano, where the Italian former Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Italy, and also the Academy, is also present Grand Master of the Academy of the Illuminati and the Dignity Order, has said, my dear friend, because this is something, you see, a lot of people say maybe Elio Zagami makes things up, no? But if you go and check volume 6.66, you will actually find an image of Pier Giorgio Bassi, which you met, with Parolin in the Vatican.
I wrote about it in my book.
And you wrote also about it in your book.
Very interesting, Confessions of Illuminati
Princess, which is also... Now, what is the fifth class? You will have to read my book, where I reveal all the secrets of the Jesuits, how the coadjutors work, because there is various Jesuits. I mean, you have the three vows of chastity, of course, obedience, poverty, all that. There is the absolute obedience. I mean, the most important vow is the fourth vow. But then you have these fifth class Jesuits, and I explain really for the first time in a long time, because I think the last book that talked about fifth class Jesuits came out like 150 years ago or something, you know. So I mean, it's like nobody wants to ever mention the fifth class Jesuits. They always talk about, of course, some of them talk about the fourth vow of the Jesuits, which is also very relevant because, of course, it's an obedience specifically to the Pope regarding missions. So once you have accepted this vow, you become like you become a candidate for the Vatican intelligence. And I explain in this book, the actual Jesuits were founded as an order, first of all in Paris, in Montmartre, in the summer of the 15th of August, Ferragosto, which is a very important date for the Marian calendar, in Montmartre, in Paris. Then they went to the Pope in 1540 in Tivoli, in the place where we used to go and eat, and I did my reawakening of the Sixth Temple of Serpents, that beautiful castle. And at that point, of course, the Jesuits became involved with the Council of Trent, which is a pivotal event for the history of the Catholic Church. And after that, the Jesuits in the 1560s became involved with something else called the Holy Alliance, which later on will become the Entity. And of course, we are talking about the intelligence service of the Vatican, which was shaped by the Jesuits. You will find everything about the fifth class Jesuits, guys, in this book, my latest book, volume 12 of my Confessions. This is a book you can purchase without purchasing all the other books, because it's a book about the Jesuits, and nobody has written a book like this for many decades, but I wanted to save it as the last installment of my Confessions, because first of all, I tell you the truth. No, the Council of Trent was in Trento, not Trieste. They are two different places. In English, Trent; in Italiano, Concilio di Trento. It's two different places. Always in the north of Italy, though. No, Trento and but in any case, what happens here is that I wanted to also be confident as a writer before challenging the Jesuits, because challenging the Jesuits is not an easy task. You see, the Knights Templars, which were left a vacuum that was filled by the Jesuits. And the mission of the Knights Templars, as we all know, was basically banking. And that's why they became also inspirational for the Freemasons, and the Freemasons became the great bankers, that they are still today. But in reality, the mission of the Jesuits instead is another one, is education. And in fact, guys, the candidate that is very close to the Jesuits, who everybody's talking about at the moment, I have a testimony which I'm about to show you, which is going to shock you. Cardinal Tagle, Antonio Luis Tagle, who is now one of the Papabili, has a significant connection to the Jesuits. He received his education with the Jesuit system, including his undergraduate studies at the Ateneo de Manila University, a Jesuit university, and his theological studies at its Loyola School of Theology. He had a Jesuit mentor, but in this video that I'm about to show, he confesses that this Jesuit mentor tricked him in becoming a Jesuit priest.
What?
Yes. He supervised his test and later advised him. Additionally, Tagle collaborated with the Jesuit communications in the Philippines on media evangelization projects. But in the video that I'm about to show you, which, by the way, is very interesting because this is a video that was published on the internet. If you want to see the whole thing, it was published like 6 years ago. And the title of it is already in itself very significant, because it says in the title, our next Pope, what's the title? This is from 6 years ago.
Our next Pope. What? They plan everything.
And in this video, he admits, and you're going to hear it with your own ears, that he was tricked by his mentor, who was a Jesuit, to become a Jesuit priest. And guys, I think you need to hear this testimony, because it's rather important, as he might become Pope. Of course, there might be also an African Pope in case he doesn't become Pope. That's another option. We said it also in my article. But guys, his testimony, I think, especially in regards to the trickery of the Jesuits, the way the Jesuits got him to become priest without him even knowing. He was actually annoyed at the beginning. He was angry about it. Check out the testimony of Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle.
Luis Antonio Tagle, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you very much for doing this interview.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Your Eminence, let me begin by asking you about growing up in the Philippines. What was it like, your childhood, your family life?
Well, my family is a normal, ordinary Filipino family. My parents were hardworking Filipinos, and the focus, I remember, was very simple. Life was very simple. And when life is simple, the focus is also clear. Our lives revolved around family, the parish church, school, and the plaza, where people congregate, where people meet each other, people get to know each other, etc. So in a way, I can say that growing up with the family that I had, growing up in the town that we had, and the parish that we had, simplified many things for me, and we knew how to prioritize. But hard work, really.
No substitute for hard work.
No. And simple living. You earn, but if you splurge on things which are not important, then it amounts to nothing. And so we also combined, hard work with priorities, and where you could be simple and not aspire for a lifestyle that is beyond your means, then that's good.
And as a child growing up, what kind of things were you into? What sparked your interest?
I was fascinated with the sciences, and I think I was brainwashed by my parents and teachers. into preparing myself for medical school. So I was bent on really going to become a doctor.
Your parents wanted you to be a
Yeah,
doctor.
yes, and I also wanted it. I did well in the sciences, math courses. Yeah, I think I was 13 years old when I started reading medical books in preparation for medical school. But that got interrupted. When I was invited to join a youth group in the parish. Yeah.
Joining that youth group, being surrounded by more people of their faith, how did that affect you?
I was befriended by a young priest who was the assistant pastor of the parish and who served also as a spiritual director of our group. And I did.
Now, this is the beginning of his story, where he befriended this priest. But then this priest goes away, and that's when the Jesuit comes in, and the story tells in a completely different operation of brainwashing and coercion towards priesthood into the Jesuits. So open your ears, guys.
I did not realize that I was already getting inspired. But then he left, he was transferred to another parish. The priest who took his place, was good to us, but I did not have that emotional, affective link with him. And he invited me to an entrance examination, in the Jesuit University, which was one of the top universities in the Philippines. And he told me, I heard that you want to go into medical school. So why not try out this Jesuit university? And they have scholarships, if you want. So yeah, I'm willing. So he said, you can take the entrance exam, but it's a battery of exams. I did not know the place. I was brought there. The first exam, name, age, etc. And then there was one question, type of vocation. So I went to the proctor. I said, what do I put here? He said, priesthood. I said, why priesthood? I said, this is an entrance exam to the seminary. So I was
tricked.
Yes, I was tricked. Yeah. And I was so angry.
I was tricked. He admits that he was tricked by his Jesuit mentor into basically becoming a priest. I mean, this is quite incredible and remarkable testimony.
But the priest told me, I said, well, I just wanted to break your mindset. Try to consider other options.
I want to break your mind. That is Jesuit brainwashing. Guys, I think that you will learn a lot about people like this guy. This guy that you have just seen is Cardinal Louis Tagle. He's 67 years of age, and the Chinese Patriotic Association, the Chinese Patriotic Church, the Catholic Patriotic Church of China, wants him as a pope as much as Xi Jinping. However, they might opt for an African one, as I explained in the article, because they have also interest with Africa. But this guy at the moment is very much in line to become pope. And if he becomes pope, he's admitting on this video that he was tricked in becoming a priest by a Jesuit. Now, he will not become a Jesuit priest because not all Jesuits wanted to become a Jesuit, because they also need the priest in other orders that are not visibly Jesuit. But he had a Jesuit mentor. You can go and check on the internet and see for yourself. And he was the guy who deceived them and brought them into the unlikely vocation, which ended up being almost forced on him.
You're young, but you have narrowed down your choices to only one.
And when did it become a serious proposition, the life of a priest?
Now I have the smart pants of the situation says, Tagle is Filipino. No, Tagle is Filipino Chinese, ignorante. And if you don't believe me, it's very, very easy. We just go and put Cardinal Tagle Chinese, and you will get, he's actually has a nickname, Cheeto.
Cheeto?
Cheeto is his nickname.
Like a Cheeto?
What, that is?
Nothing.
I mean, that's his nickname. Okay, let me see if I can find this whole thing here so you can see it. Okay, because I don't have, I have to have access to the screen while the video is down. So let me put it down, and I have to see if I can get it on this Cardinal Tagle Chinese. And not only is Chinese, but the Vatican thinks that the fact he is of Chinese ancestry, aside from being Filipino, is an asset. He is born in Manila in 1957. Cheeto, as he prefers to be called, is the eldest child of intensely devout Catholic parents, an ethnic Tagalog father and a Chinese Filipino mother. Tagle was deeply influenced by the Jesuits, completing both his bachelor's and master's degree at the Orde Ateneo de Manila University. And also Cardinal Tagle is a supporter of the China-Vatican deal. Check this out. In 2022, Tagle defends the infamous China-Vatican deal that I talk about in my book, in volume 12, which was first sealed in 2018, and then after it was renewed every 2 years. And Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle is a staunch supporter of this deal that basically made the Vatican agree to accept the bishops nominated by the Chinese Communist Party. The Vatican decision to renew its provisional agreement with China, this was in 2022, because every 2 years they renew it. The Filipino cardinal considers a contender to become the Catholic Church First Sergeant Pope, said the Holy See signed the agreement to safeguard the valid apostolic succession, though there is no valid apostolic succession if you have a bishop. Cheeto or Kiko? Not Kiko, Cheeto. Cheeto means small. He must be small.
This priest who tricked me succeeded in confusing me. Yeah? And so I really asked myself,
Okay, the Jesuits succeeded in confusing him. He's admitting in this interview something that, will stay in the history books. If this guy becomes Pope, this is definitely an admission that he was brainwashed by the Jesuits.
Do I really want to become a doctor? And I was convincing myself, yes. Then the results of the exams came out. I flunked the exam, I was accepted to the university, but not to the seminary, And then I felt sad. And then again, I told myself, well, if you don't want to enter the seminary, why are you sad? So that started the soul searching, and then all the experiences in the parish, the apostolate, and the witness of these good priests.
Now somebody's asking me, what is his mother tongue? He speaks various languages, and he actually speaks Italian, he speaks English, his mother tongue is Filipino, he speaks Spanish, of course, because Philippines was part of the Spanish Empire. And he thanks, actually, in an interview that he does in Italian, the Jesuits priest who brought Christianity to the many islands in the Philippines. Now, this is an important element in my book. There's a whole chapter about the way the Jesuits colonized Asia, China. That was, the moment they were established in 1540, Matteo Ricci, one of the people who was closest to Ignazio Loyola, was immediately sent into the Far East and became advisor to the Chinese emperor. Their mission was not to bring the gospel. Their mission was to, like I explained in my book, gain knowledge, especially occult knowledge, exchange knowledge, and also become involved with the education of the elite, because that's their mission. So even in these foreign lands, they were, in charge of bringing mathematics, astronomy. Today, if the Jesuits are regarded as the number one in the astronomical sector with that Lucifer thing, Mount Graham, whatever, and all that, they are very much in charge of the astronomy of the Vatican. It is because they are, in a way, connected since the very birth to the stars and to the planets. In fact, they are really worshippers of Isis rather than worshippers of the Holy Mary. And I explain this, of course, in volume 12 of my Confession, which is my latest book. You can find it on Amazon. I wanted to show you guys why Cardinal Parolin, that the Academy of the Illuminati in Rome would like to be Pope, will never be Pope, because Parolin is not China's preferred conclave candidate.
And they paid a lot of money.
And they want this guy, Tagle. They don't want this old fart of Parolin, that, by the way, collapsed on Wednesday. He had some physical problem. So Cardinal Parolin says, has been widely considered to be a preferred candidate of Beijing, but in recent days it has begun to appear that China could lay on the groundwork to throttle back a Parolin candidacy in favor of another papal candidate. And that papal candidate, guys, is, of course, here in the pic, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. And the Philippines has 77 dialects, with Tagalog as its main dialect, and he speaks, in fact, Tagalog. Yes, I want to specify that because we have a Filipino born here in the chat who has specified. And actually, Luis Antonio Tagle talks as his main language Tagalog, which, I'm not very acquainted with all that, those languages in the Filipinos. I'm afraid that being such a fractured country, on the contrary of Japan, which is basically more or less a whole little thing here, though separated in a way. It had an indigenous population, by the way. Even Japan that was treated not so well. But in any case, Japan is much more unified language speaking. Filipino, a little bit different, the situation. So in this book, Christy, I explain how the Jesuits arrived in China, arrived in India, arrived in Japan. But in Japan, they didn't manage to get the special relationship with the emperor, also because the emperor, by the time the Jesuits arrived with Francis Xavier, it was ruled by the shogun, not by the emperor. The military guy, the guy in charge of the armed forces, the shogun.
We say shogun.
No, well, we say shogun.
Is that the way you say it correctly?
I guess you say shogun. Okay. I think you say shogun because that's the way Akira.
There was some shogun called shogun. So
no. I'm brought up with the movies of Akira Kurosawa. My father made me see these movies since I was a kid, so I was brainwashed by the movies of Akira Kurosawa, and of course I see them even in the cinema. And the shoguns were really some of the main characters in these films of Akira Kurosawa. So, and they were fierce. And what happened, as I explained in this book, is that they didn't manage to, the shogun wasn't convinced by the Jesuits. He was rather convinced by somebody else who arrived, a Protestant guy who arrived from England and changed their whole mindset about these Jesuits and warned them about the danger they represent. So I think that you will find a lot of good stuff in Confessions of Illuminati, Volume 12, but also there's a whole chapter about the relationship with Freemasonry, with the Illuminati, how they actually operated. And historically, guys, this information is being confirmed by Masonic historians. You were with me the other day with a Masonic historian, contacted me confirming that what I said in this book is absolutely accurate. And they have found evidence of it even in the Vatican archives. So I would suggest that you all get this book, Volume 12 of my Confessions, which in the back has the image of Ignacio Loyola receiving a red flag, which is actually a painting that is found in the Mother Church of the Jesuits, but it's very communist, the red flag. And actually, we have added the symbol of communism. This image almost resembles those propaganda images of Mao Zedong's Long March. In any case, the way things are moving is, of course, that we have also a lot of talk regarding Africa. Well, Africa is also another possibility in all this. The African Populists are there.
Approximately 20% of the global Catholic population resides in Africa. With 18 electors, 13% of the College of Cardinals represents a fifth of this growing demographic in the Church. This demographic shift is influencing the global Catholic Church's focus, with increasing attention to African perspectives in theological discussions and leadership roles. The College of Cardinals boasts 29 total cardinals hailing from 23 African countries. Of the 18 electors in that group, all but 3 were created by Pope Francis. They represent 17 countries: Algeria, Burkina Faso, Cape Verde, Central African Republic, Congo, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Kenya, Madagascar, Morocco, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, South Sudan, and Tanzania. The youngest elector from Africa is Cardinal Dieudonné Nzapalenga of the African Central Republic at 58 years old. He is followed by the Archbishop of Juba in South Sudan, Cardinal Stephen Mulla, who is 61. The Bishop of Equilobia in Nigeria, Cardinal Peter Ebere Okpaleke, is 62 and was elevated by Pope Francis after being initially rejected by his ethnic group, leading to the creation of a new diocese. The cardinal electors from Algeria and the Ivory Coast are both 63. Dominican Cardinal Jean-Paul Vesco and Cardinal Ignace Bessi Dogbo. The third cardinal in the history of Tanzania, Cardinal Potaz Rugambwa, is 64 and is followed in age by Capuchin Franciscan Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Besungu, who is 65, and the Archbishop of Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He serves as the elected leader of the African bishops as president of the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, or SECAM. The Archbishop of Kigali in Rwanda, Cardinal Antoine Kabanda, is 66 years old and Rwanda's first cardinal, a survivor of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Just south of Rwanda is South African Cardinal Stephen Brislin, now 68, and Archbishop of Johannesburg, who oversaw the controversial.
No, I don't think that any white man living in Africa will ever become a pope. But in any case, I want to answer to a question here in the chat. Leo, don't you think Francis was the last pope, as some have been saying? Well, there is a whole chapter about it here in this book.
He wrote the book of...
Apart from the fact that I wrote the book for Francis the Last Pope, which was published, it was my first book in the English language in 2015. But in this book, there is a chapter which explains why Pope Francis is the last pope. The actual canon law, the actual expedient that Pope Francis and the Jesuits used, publishing an important document in June of last year. It's all here in this book. And so it's chapter 4 is entitled Jesuits, the Last Pope and the Rise of the European Fourth Reich. So volume 12 of my confessions. You can find the answer to all your questions. Also, if you are searching for questions regarding the alleged son of Jorge Mario Bergoglio and many other things. So, I mean, it is a book that is complete on its own, but also the Sangale Mafia, the people who mentored Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Why Jorge Mario Bergoglio has been buried in Santa Maria Maggiore, which is a church that I know very well, as you know, Christy, and a church where he was buried with the money from a P2 Lodge member. So this is part of my book. That's why this Confessions of an Illuminati has an M, which looks like a Masonic apron, because in the Luciferian court of the Jesuits, you have Freemasons, you have people from the think tanks. The Club Bilderberg was created by a Jesuit, fifth-class agent. Then we have the WEF, Klaus Schwab, who was also inspired by the Jesuits to create his club, his group of powerful people in Davos. I think that you will find definitely what... I mean, Christy told me one thing after sharing this book, that she thought this book will really challenge the faith of a lot of people, especially people who still believe in this charade going on. What do you think, Christy? Is that right what I said? Huh?
Well, for people that really have faith in the Catholic Church, it's going to rock the foundation of everything that they believe in. So you really have to have a strong connection to God.
Yeah.
And, that connection probably brought you to read the book, volume 12. So
To write the book.
No, for people to go and read that
okay.
book,
To come to actually.
So if you're there reading it, then you've been brought there. You have God inside you to bring you there. But you have to have a lot of God to do.
And guys, what we have said today in these 60 minutes of the show today is only scratching the surface of the index. It's not going into the details of this book. Now, rightly so, it's possible that Tagle speaks Mandarin, but Tagle is supported by the Chinese Patriotic Church, which itself was created by the Chinese Communist Party in 1957. I mean, we are talking here about the Patriotic Church, which has originally no link with Jesus Christ, but only with Mao Zedong. The Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association was founded in 1957 by a group of Chinese Catholics who met in Beijing with officials from the Chinese Communist Party and the Religious Affairs Bureau. But it had been already active since the early 50s. They had been putting together these manifestos. In December of 1950, the Chinese Catholics, with Father Wang Lianzhou in the North Sichuan province, they penned what is known as the Guangyuan Manifesto, which is signed by some 500 Catholics. And they said in this manifesto, I mean, Casey laughs when I pronounce it in Chinese, but my pronunciation in Chinese is not that bad, guys. In any case, in the manifesto of the first, let's say, Catho communists in 1950, December 1950, said, and I'm quoting them, "We are determined to sever all relations with imperialism, to do all we can to reform ourselves, to establish a new church that should be independent in its administration, in its resources, and is an apostolate." They started to nominate their own bishops. And in fact, guys, in my book, of course, I'm not going to tell you everything it's my book, because, but instead, in fact, I'm just actually introducing the subject, because here I bring the evidence of the people who were involved with this, and amongst them, the most important figure, this guy who was a Jesuit, who then abandoned, well, let's say publicly abandoned, but then maybe never abandoned the Jesuits, because you never abandon the Jesuits, as this book evidence over and over again, even with those Jesuits who married and then were called in Rome and said, "Don't worry, you marry, you have children, we don't care, you're still a fourth vow Jesuit." You remember with like that guy in Hungary. Yeah. But in any case, this guy befriended Cardinal McCarrick, and his last message to McCarrick was delivered through fifth-class agent Nancy Pelosi. This guy here is the late Bishop Aloysius Jin Luxian of Shanghai. This guy was the most powerful guy in the Chinese Patriotic Church, and is the guy who facilitated the coming together of the Vatican-China deal, which wasn't born in a day. I mean, it wasn't born only with Bergoglio. It started gradually with John Paul II, who started to accept the first cardinals into the fold, then Ratzinger, who still, though, supported the underground church in China. But then you have the deal, which was sanctioned in 2018. I mean, I'm talking here about a deal. You can go on Google and find it, but in this book, you will find the people who made it possible. I mean, this deal was made possible by the defrocked pedophile Cardinal McCarrick, who was given the possibility to go and have sex with all the young Chinese seminarians in Beijing or all over China. So, I think that everything you know about the world is controlled by this or by that is completely wrong. When you think about the mainstream conspiracy theories that you hear, it's always bashing the Jew. Now, I'm not saying that there is Jews that are not heretics, Sabbatean Frankists who are not involved in this whole thing. But to bash a whole race means being racist. And unfortunately, the alternative media is fueled with anti-Semitic and racist theories. Here instead, there is facts, not theories, facts, proven hard facts. And why did the Jesuits prevail in the conspiracy theories by erasing their name and blaming the Jew? Because they themselves, as I explain in this book, from the 18th century onwards, wrote a series of books or publications blaming over and over again the the Jews. So the attention span of everybody will go on the Jews rather than on the Jesuits. But the guy who screwed you, Dr. Fauci, was a fifth-class Jesuit agent from Georgetown University. Wasn't a Jew. It was Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And he was Italian.
And Nancy Pelosi is an Italian-American. She's also screwing you every day. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like I explained in this book, was introduced by the Jesuits. You can just go and Google yourself and put Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, America Jesuit Review 2018, and you will get the bio of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introducing herself to the political arena on the official Jesuit magazine. Of course, Fauci's Catholic. Fauci's a Jesuit. Guys, go and do your research. I mean, it's just like they control all the universities. They have been able to, that's why Trump has published this, seemingly stupid photo generated with the AI of him as a pope. Fordham and Georgetown are both Jesuit. And Georgetown is where Dr. Anthony Fauci. But then you have also Fordham. And in my book, guys, for all those idiots who come and say, but Donald J. Trump is a Jesuit. Christy, can you tell them what they will find in this book? Sum it up a little bit, what they will find in the book in regard to why the Jesuits hate Trump so much.
Because he knew what their tricks were. They had their cards all out, and he read them, and he's like, "I'm not falling for your tricks."
No, Fauci wasn't at Fordham. Fauci was at Georgetown University, man.
But Donald Trump didn't want to fall for the tricks.
I think that Anthony Fauci is one of the most known figures of Georgetown University. I mean, he even have. I mean, if you don't believe me, you can just go on the Georgetown. Check this out.
Ew, he's evil. Kills so many
Georgetown
people.
University, Global Health Institute, Anthony Fauci. Dr. Anthony Fauci serves as a distinguished university professor in the School of Medicine Department of Medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases. He's also an additional appointment in the McCourt School of Public Policy. This is Georgetown. It's not Fordham. Let's get the cards right. He's a distinguished university at Georgetown University. Okay, is that okay? Okay, so let's go back instead in the Fordham University situation with Trump, because I hear way too much rubbish and I want to shut the show and shut up all those idiots who has always come on here. But Trump is a Jesuit. No, Trump was a Jesuit. It's a stupid assertion because he was only with the Jesuits for 2 years to learn their pious frauds, because their techniques is, of course, of pious frauds, we call them.
Same thing happened to him.
And I studied with the Jesuits myself. So, I mean, that's why I have written this book. I mean, I can expose them because I studied with them. Actually, if you don't believe me, I'm going to go and pick up a photo of it. So then maybe you can believe me, as you know.
He doesn't lie.
No, but just a second. I will go. I want to explain for a second that in this book you will find the actual testimonies of people in Fordham who blame Trump and say that Jesuit education plays a part in forming our political views, and so Trump has betrayed the Jesuit education that he received. And in this book, you will also see, because President Trump went to Fordham, not Georgetown. He went to Fordham. Fauci went to Georgetown. Is a guy in Georgetown. But Dr. Fauci is a guy Trump is another guy. Trump was in Fordham. In his brief experience, Trump attended Fordham for 2 years. And of course, he learned mainly theology and philosophy. And there is 2 secret societies that tried to enroll him. I write about in volume 12. One was founded and approved by Father Leo McGuglin. Is called the Fordham Club. And he didn't want to join it because membership is reserved to about 30 members who declare complete loyalty to the Jesuits. And then he dismissed the idea. And I explained this in this book in detail. Then there is another group which is known as the Partenian Sodality, also known as the Second Sodality. After the Second Vatican Council, they became completely covert, this group. And it was, I think, a group of Jesuits who founded it in the beginning of the 20th century. And he refused that too. So this is so I mean, aside from the fact where Dr. Fauci studied, he studied, of course, with the Jesuits, regardless of the fact that Fauci might have studied in Fordham. He teach in Georgetown University. So that is what I in Fordham. You have though also people like who are not even Catholic, like for example, Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton was in Georgetown University, if I don't get it. I mean, he was actually, Bill Clinton is another Jesuit agent, but also Hillary Clinton. I mean, these people.
Do they breed the politicians in Georgetown?
I mean, it's not only Georgetown, though. We have many universities. And to be honest, Dr. Anthony Fauci studied at the Fordham Preparatory School. But when it comes down to an advanced education, of course, the Jesuits are judged as the best. I mean, there is also other people, of course, who studied with the educational Jesuits. Every Newsom, for example. Let's read what Newsom said about his education with the Jesuits. So here we go. Okay, check this out. Newsom said, "I guess this is my Jesuit upbringing. It comes from the Bible, where there are many parts, but only one body, where one suffers. We all suffer. I mean, it's a fundamental, a very human value." Governor Gavin Newsom, who is another Jesuit agent. So you see, it's fueled by Castro was a Jesuit agent. In this book, though, I focused on the education of Donald J. Trump at Fordham because a lot of people focus on him way too much. Of course, I cite also the involvement of Dr. Fauci with the Jesuits, both in his education as well as in his teaching. And Dr. Fauci is listed in my book together with Fidel Castro, Pope Francis, Greg Boyle, John Kerry. You have also that other loser of Tim Kaine, which was along with Hillary Clinton in 2016. Well, of course, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are two Jesuit agents.
So
Fauci, Dr. Fauci, who is described by his fellow Jesuit pundits at Georgetown as the distinguished university professor, and who has a long history with Jesuit education because he started when he attended Regis High School, a Jesuit school in New York City, and then the College of the Holy Cross. These are things that I wrote in my book. So it's not like this book is very much in detail.
Can
of
I say
it.
Something about your
Yes,
book?
yeah.
When I was editing it, at night, I would go to sleep.
Good that Ernie Douglas said before College of the Holy Cross, Fauci went to the Regis High School in New York City. It's written in this book. So you can't get it wrong with this book. You have all the answers, guys.
I was going to say, when I was editing it, I would go to bed at night and dream and then have like these nightmares about the Jesuits. And I wake up and I go, it's the Jesuits. It's the Jesuits. And it's so funny because Michael Jaco, he's doing the same thing. He said, it's the Jesuits, it's the Jesuits, it's the Jesuits.
No, but when it comes down now to people, for example, I explain here the fact that Ignacio Loyola was accused of being a crypto Jew, or at least of Jewish origin. But he was, first of all, an Alumbrados. Alumbrados were Illuminati who were practicing a mix of Jewish mysticism, Islamic mysticism, Gnosticism, and he was actually arrested several times by the Inquisition before founding this order and being accepted by the Pope. So the whole story about Ignacio Loyola from the very start is in this book. And all this, of course, this incredible book is, I tell you, undebunkable. So I will prefer you to read this book and then be able to comment it rather than maybe just, comment it without reading it, because I think everybody that tries to comment, somebody says Kerry is a Jew, but among the Jews you have the Sabbatean Frankists, and we know very well that, for example, among the Jews you have also the Erev Rav, you have the heretics. The Jesuit order for the first 50, 60, 70 years accepted the Jews amongst the order, then they decided to stop accepting the Jews, but they were actually very influential in the foundation of the order. However, they were not the traditional Jews. They were conversos, they were Maranos, they were those who have abandoned the faith because in Spain, the Inquisition was very active. Let's not forget that in this book, I describe also the role of the Inquisition, the Dominicans, and then how the Jesuits take over the Inquisition. So I think that we have really gone through a lot, guys, today, and I see there is a very interesting audience. We have a lot of people following us today. We have actually an unprecedented number, I guess, of people today.
What do you mean unprecedented?
Well, I mean, we have over 200 people today who are following us. We don't usually get that much in live, but today seems that people are very interested. Well, let's before leaving, mention again the Red Dragon. The Red Dragon is a very important element in the Book of Revelation, and I really see the Chinese taking over the Vatican as part of this element. The Dragon of the Apocalypse phrase often refers to the Red Dragon mentioned in the Book of Revelation, and is of course prominent in Christian eschatology. Of course, it doesn't explicitly identify with the Red Dragon as China, but it's quite obvious that it's referring to China, because the Red Dragon is a representation of power, evil, and a source of conflict. I would like to say that in this situation in which Trump has posted this simple meme without commenting it, also using the official social media from the White House, it's not about sparking outrage, but it's about sending a very powerful message to China in a moment of confrontation, also in regards to the tariff war. So this is very important. I mean, many students of Bible prophecy consider Revelation 16, 12, 16 to possibly refer to China in the end times, especially this passage which I would like Christy to read.
The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Then demonic spirits, they perform signs, go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them to the battle on the great day of God Almighty. Then they gather the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon.
Now, guys, this situation, this Armageddon might be with the robots. What has happened in China in the last few days, which I'm going to show you in this video, shows us that these robots can really go out of hand. I mean, they can become extremely dangerous. I never saw a robot starting to kick and beat up a group of Chinese people, but this is what happened in China this week. guys, this is it's pretty interesting. As you can see, the Chinese have been there with their artificial intelligence, their robotics, trying to become the leaders in AI by 2030. But then, in the end, they might lose control and face the adversity of these robots. This was simply a calculation gone wrong, an algorithm gone wrong, and see what happened. I mean, it's pretty impressive. I have online Greg Zismansky, and so my wife is going to leave me now, and I'm going to bring in Greg Zismansky. Hello, Greg. How are you?
Hey, pretty good, Leo. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, and it's an honor and a pleasure, first of all, to have my old friend Greg here with us. I wanted to have you for a long time, and I want to introduce you properly to my audience. We have a lot of people who are following us from all over the world, and now we are broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, X, Rumble, and I started my exposure work thanks to you, Greg, in 2006. So I would like you actually to talk about that, because then we're going to go into the Jesuit topic, which is also the topic of my latest book. As I was saying to the people today, there's not really been many books about the Jesuits in the last 40 years, apart from Malachi Martin, our friend Eric John Phelps, and then, of course, we had Tupper Susi, but that's it. I mean, nobody's talking about the Jesuits because everybody's afraid of the Jesuits. But first of all, let me introduce my dear friend Greg Zismansky, a journalist who was in Rome, also in the 70s, who was himself the victim of a terrorist attack from a CIA-led group, by the way. And
it brings back memories, Leo. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was. It was interesting. You know, it was interesting because it occurred. There was a bombing at the newspaper at the time, and I happened to be walking down the hallway, then went downstairs to the newsroom. And about 10 seconds later, the bomb exploded in the American newspaper. And luckily, I was underneath all the big building in the basement. But I was about 10 seconds from meeting my maker. That's how close it was. As you know, that was the strategy of tension, the terrorist attacks they were doing in Rome at the time that led to what 9/11 occurred, you know, so.
Yes, I'm gonna actually show an article from, I think it's United Press International, about that. It was which year was that exactly, Greg, in which you were the victim of this terrorist attack?
What year? God, you know, Leo, I can't quite remember. 1980 something. It should
yes,
be
it says here it was 1982. 1982, and basically President Reagan was scheduled to visit Rome on June 7, and the bomb wrecked the entrance hall and furniture and equipment in the second floor office of the International Daily News at 7:40 a.m. And God had other plans for you, Greg, and you became really the guy who, together with other researchers like me, Eric John Phelps, and others, attempted, I think, before anybody else 20 years ago, to expose the Jesuits on the internet. It didn't end up well for us because we got kicked out of every single radio station we kind of collaborated with. I remember
that's
true. Yes, so but please tell us more about it, because I have a lot of people, I'm sure, here that want to hear what you have to say.
Well, you know something, it was interesting because when I came to Rome, I was unfamiliar with the Jesuits or the Vatican intrigue that I learned about. And as I began covering stories and going to the Vatican, it seemed to be, you know, I tried to get a couple articles published, but they wouldn't do it. They were a little controversial, but still I wasn't sure of really what was going on. As in America, we're not told that story. It's hidden. Well, anyway, that bombing, that terrorist attack was kind of the turning point in my life, because I started to research, well, who the hell put this bomb some guy coming in. It was planned, and I learned that the CIA had a lot of involvement in that, together with some Vatican people. So it started my quest into trying to figure out what happened, leading to the famous story of Cardinal Marcinkus and all of his doings. And that's really what started me researching it and then talking about it when I returned to the States. So that was a pretty interesting time during those years, Leo. As you know, there was so many terrorist attacks.
And then it was the middle of the, I mean, when did you start the Arctic Beacon?
You know, that was I started that around 2002, 2003. Yeah. And
so in the early days of the internet, I wanted to say that to the people who are following us, because you have not been really very active on the internet lately. And I wanted to synthesize a little bit, but also I wanted to tell the people who are following us that here we're talking with a pioneer of the exposure work. Today, everybody's improvising himself, citizen journalists and all this bullshit. But in reality, here we have a real journalist who did some proper exposure work, at the risk of losing also, of course, the support of his fellow journalists. But I still remember the first time I entered the Foreign Journalists Association in Rome, and they still remember you. I mean, you were quite a legend in Rome, Greg.
You know, and it's interesting because I remember when I came back to the States and I started radio, what happened was I was doing some stories about Cardinal Marcinkus, and you know the story about him. You've probably filled in your listeners about he was the president.
I mean, I think that the interesting thing was that then we started to talk in 2006 when I got in a conflict with the Monte Carlo Lodge, which Marcinkus was associated with.
Right.
And there was a moment in which you were about to interview him, and then he died.
Right. And, you know, that was quite interesting because the story was starting to gain some legs again, and the Italian media was coming. He was in an archdiocese in
my colleague from Leiene, from Italia Uno.
And I was setting up some interviews through his godson, who lived near where I was in Idaho. And this is an interesting story because I interviewed him, and he came on my show and wanted to defend Cardinal Marcinkus and state that he was a patsy. He was not involved. And Greg, you really got to do some more research on this, and I let him speak for an hour or so. He contacted me several times, and we started talking, you know, just talking on things. And he said to me something quite interesting. He said, Greg, you know, if you continue doing this with the Jesuits, here's what's going to happen to you. You're not going to be able to get any work. All the people in America won't care about you, and the story's just going to fade away. So why don't you do this? He said, I can get you a nice job in entertainment. Why don't you stop all this stuff? And at the time, I was completely absorbed. It was my whole day and my whole night, and trying to get people to understand really how this works. And you basically hit the nail on the head many times, and I enjoyed having you on my show.
But I remember what happened after. I mean, I was accused of espionage. I ended up having to flee Norway. There was some, I mean, this was not just an exposure work that both me and you did. Nothing happened. We started to have real persecution. I mean, it wasn't a joke. It was like real persecution. It was a life struggle. We ended up losing friends. We ended up losing family, and even our life almost in various occasions. So I would like to explain through you that doing a book on the Jesuits is no easy thing, because these people are the scientists of the church, but they are also the Vatican assassins, as our friend John Phelps used to call them. Right. And I remember when you did that whole confession series, which was extremely revealing at the time. it was, I mean, the internet was populated, but very few people used to talk about these topics. It was mainly you, then you had, of course, Alex Jones, you had David Icke, you had these other people, but very few people wanted to really go deep into the rabbit hole of Jesuitism like you, Greg.
Yeah, and you know, what happened, and people always asked me, you know, how do you continue this? How do you stay alive? You know, because it's a danger. You know, the number of times I was contacted with threats, I can't count. But the point was, the same gentleman that I talked to, godson of Father Marcinkus, I asked him the same question. He said, well, it all depends on how many people are following you. If you have 2 million people, you might not be here at the time. You know what I'm saying? So he was an interesting, who was trying to get me to stop and offering me things because he knew I didn't have much money doing this. But anyway, I didn't. And as things continue, let me explain something here. Back then, when the internet was young, this story got some legs. You got a lot of attention, and the reason was there weren't 100 million people on the internet, or the Jesuits with their way of getting rid of the story by having all this nonsense where people get attracted to things that are just insane, keeps them away from the truth. And that's how they operate. So as the internet grew, they knew that if they could control it, stories like yours or mine could never really get to the masses. So as the internet is now a huge monster, I found that this story gets hidden so bad that in a sense, I kind of just stopped for a while. I put in maybe 20 years doing this, and look forward to maybe starting the show again. I'm thinking about it, but that's why I haven't done
will
much.
Be glad to publicize it, Greg. Greg, I will be glad to publicize any new show or any new initiative you do here on my show. I will always love to have you in the future as a guest. I remember when at one point, as you know, I was, my first wife was Muslim, and suddenly a Jesuit appeared out of nowhere who was actually writing the foreword for the book of Fethullah Gulen, who was the head of this huge Muslim.
I remember.
And also this demonstrates that the Jesuits are not just about Christianity. They're about infiltrating every single religion on the planet. Isn't that the case, Greg?
Yeah. And
I mean,
you know, you got it.
It was quite impressive the way that things really manifested when we were in those early days of the internet. And I remember when we got kicked out of GCN. You remember?
Yes.
And then after the Republican broadcasting,
I remember that.
Why do you think?
Why do you think out of the Republican? Republic Broadcasting.
Yeah. Why do you think they were so scared of GCN and then after Republic Broadcasting?
Well, I was pretty close to. I was right there in Austin, Texas, working at Republic Broadcasting, and at the same time doing a show on GCN, right, on Genesis. And I don't think anybody else was doing both stations. What happened was Stadtmiller, the owner, basically came to me and said, if you don't stop talking about the Jesuits every day, I'm going to cut you off. And I said, why? And he said, we just can't have it. So really, it was a question mark of whether he was trying to cover being closely involved with the alternative media. Maybe he was afraid of losing a lot of money that funded the people that funded that show, that network, because there weren't ads enough to make that thing go. It was a nice office and everything. So I never really understood, but I kind of figured that was it. And that was the time when my show was really popular. I mean, I was having so many people and kind donations that kept me going.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. This was the Jesuit who appeared out of nowhere in Oslo, where I was living at the time. He was at the time the Secretary of Interreligious Affairs for the Jesuits. And this guy, who is called Thomas Michel, who, by the way, also teaches at Georgetown University, appeared out of nowhere just before after my former wife betrayed me, and then eventually got arrested for espionage. I mean, these people are really powerful.
Yeah, right.
It's no joke.
You got it.
And I remember.
But anyway,
but what happened with Eric John Phelps? What happened with him? Where is he now?
You know, he started his own show. In fact, I think he still does. You know, I lost track of him a while back. He had a radio station that he started, but I don't know. I'd have to find out. I'm kind of out of the loop. But anyway, here's what I wanted to mention, because I got to run.
Yes. Sure.
Why don't I still have a website? I may start up. Keep in touch. Maybe we can do another show, and I'll bring some new information.
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you so much for joining me, especially because today was also for me the day I will present my book on the Jesuits to my audience, and it was a great honor to have you here. Greg Zismansky, a proper journalist, an investigative journalist who has dedicated his life to real journalism, who has discovered the Jesuits while he was actually a foreign correspondent in Rome, out of all places, which is where the Jesuits have their headquarters in Borgo Santo Spirito. And Greg, I'm sure that you will tell us many stories in the future, if you ever have the possibility to come back, about the Jesuits in Borgo Santo Spirito, and also some of your past guests, and also your own experiences. Thank you so much for being on with us, Greg. God bless you. You have anything else to add? Yeah.
Before I go, let me mention this. I just wanted to mention, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Am I cutting out?
Yes,
no, I was going to mention.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
I'd love to come back I'd love to come back, because I think during the time I did my show, I tried to interview anybody that had any information about the Jesuits, and I think I'll tell you something. It's an amazing story that's now even more hidden than it was 20 years ago for people.
Yeah.
So there's maybe a lot of,
especially after the papacy of Pope Francis. We had a Jesuit. Yes, we also had a Jesuit Pope. So I guess that things changed even dramatically after that. We knew that was coming, though. A Jesuit Pope was coming. We talked about it many times before that happened.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Greg.
Well, listen, let's keep in touch, and I'll come on again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Greg Zismansky, and we speak soon. And Christy, of course, you are now, let's say, off the hook. So
I'm off the hook now. So look.
Yeah, good.
I changed my clothes.
Yes.
And I'm like all good now, and I'm not in my
guys,
my setup, so I can dance.
No worries. We are about to pass to the music part of the show. The last, the sound of the end, which is still the Leo Che with the Italian rapper today, because I heard that people are appreciating that rap in Italian. Isn't that the case, Christy?
Yeah.
You have a bit of a hip hop look, so maybe you
I come over here?
Yeah. Maybe
hip hop.
Guys, volume 12 of my confessions. You just heard it from Greg Zismansky, how relevant the Jesuits are, and how even more secretive they are and dangerous today in 2025. Please push like, spread this video wide all over the internet, because the information you heard today was particularly important and particularly relevant. And we see each other, of course, next week. Well, Christy, at this point, as you are all dressed up in a hip-hop mode, here we go with Leo Che.
Leo Zagami, la politica cambia musica.
And ladies and gentlemen, let's go and check the setup where the conclave is gonna be taking place in a few days from now. And in 1 week, we're gonna have a pope. So get ready for another, actually even more woke pope.
Chiesa, servizi segreti, NATO, gesuiti, illuminati, spionaggio, massoni, scandali infiltrati, MK Ultra, criminali organizzati.
The opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Nuovo ordine mondiale.
Parla di ricatti, di fatti e misfatti, parla di illuminati, infatti fa luce sui fatti. E tra tanti mischiati a sta mischia da matti, cantanti, drogati e politici rispettati. E tu non ci credi e fai lo scettico, ma all'ordine massonico e all'ordine del giorno spegni quel cazzo di monitor, che è da lì che ti controllano, tra mode che nascono e muoiono, giochi come vogliono. Tutti zitti che l'occhio ci scruta e la cura alla gente più astuta sta in fiale di cicuta. Non ne sai o non vuoi, perché le conseguenze poi rischiano d'essere più grandi di noi. Ma la Zagami li ha già visti sti scenari, 3 pilastri, 2 colonne e pentagrammi vari, spionaggio, satanismo, Vaticano e templari. Ma Leo c'è per non restare ignari. Dammi una mano un po' a svegliare sta nazione che non crede nell'ovvio, però si fa una religione. Servi della chiesa in nome di un solo signore che presto piegherà il pianeta in una situazione di disordine sociale. Messaggio subliminale, controllo mentale, nuovo ordine mondiale.
A new world order.
Nuovo ordine mondiale.
Chiesa, servizi segreti, NATO, gesuiti, illuminati, spionaggio, massoni, scandali infiltrati, MK Ultra, criminali organizzati.
E quindi la scelta delle 2 pillole, quella blu e quella rossa. Io ho scelto quella rossa.